Okay, let's talk about planning. I've just come off of my mastermind call with the coach that I work with, where we've just been looking at quarter one and thinking about quarter two. What do we want out of the next couple of months? And what have we been working on that's been working really well? What hasn't been working so well, but also what's been draining our energy? So, we don't have this limitless pot of energy. And, I know for some of you, you are still working part-time, full-time shift work alongside trying to create and build your business. So we don't have this extra energy that we can afford to waste. So we need to be really careful. And actually those reflection opportunities give us that time to do that. So, I know, and I know I've shared this with you before, I find the planning element more of a challenge. I'm so used to working in that reactive environment that actually sitting down and planning is a real challenge for me. And so over the last 8 years now, it's been something that I have learnt to do more of. I've learnt to get better at it, lots of practice. But the planning is really important. We need to plan what we're going to deliver in our business. We need to plan what we're going to sell. We need to plan in how we are going to message and market that. So we do need to think ahead. Even when we still work reactively on the day, we still want to think ahead as to the things that we want to do. So the planning stage is really important. So my 5 top tips around planning. So the first thing is to start with the end in mind. And it sounds so obvious when we say it, but we do need to be reminded of it. We need to define what success looks like before we jump into taking action. So we need to ask ourselves, what am I actually working towards? So for those of you who've got goals around income, or you've got goals around numbers of clients, you need to be really clear on what that looks like over the quarter. And then you can start to look at what would that look like each month. And then you can start to look at what that might look like each week. Or maybe you are running or launching a plan this quarter. So actually those numbers will be in that plan. So then you need to have that plan for that launch phase of the plan or program that you are launching. But unless we get really clear with the end in mind, unless we get really clear on that, it's very hard then to put the detail into the planning. Vague goals create vague results. So unless we get really specific, what is it we want to sell? What numbers do we want to bring in terms of clients? What does that look like in terms of income generation? Then we can start to be really specific as to who. So who are we trying to bring in into those plans, into the programs? What's the journey that they are on? Where are they now? Where are they going to get to as a result of working with you on this plan, on this program, or with you as a client or a customer? So getting really clear on all of this detail is going to help you to plan it, because it's not just about bringing those numbers in. We need to think about how we're going to market that to bring those numbers in. So the more specific we can be about what it is that we're going to achieve in that quarter, then we can start to look at what that needs to look like over the weeks and the months. It's one of the questions I get asked a lot around is quite often people see the post-it notes behind me and they're like, what's on the post-it notes? And this is my breakdown of the quarter. It will be the months, it will be the weeks, it will be all of the tasks and all of the activities that I'm going to need to complete to be able to stay on track and hit the goals that I'm setting. It doesn't come without spending some time planning the detail, but I need to start with the end in mind to be able to know exactly what it is that I want to achieve. If I don't have clarity around what success looks like, if I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of numbers, in terms of clients, in terms of people that I can work with and have that impact with, then it's very hard then for me to work out how I make that happen. So we do really need to start with the end in mind and get really, really clear, really, really specific about what that looks like so that we can then reverse engineer your outcome, which leads me to number 2. So number 1, start with the end in mind. Number 2, reverse engineer your outcome. So we can set big, hairy and scary goals. Nothing wrong with that, as long as we chunk it down into smaller, achievable, manageable steps. Now, we dependent on the stage of your business, will depend on what kind of goals you're setting. But everybody needs to be setting goals. Even if you are at the very early stages of your business, you still need to be setting goals. You still need to be following the same process as somebody who's been running a business for 10 plus years. Your goals will look very different, but you still need to set them. So once you've got your goals, however big, and hairy and scary they may feel, and I do recommend that you put a stretch goal in. Sometimes our goals are a little bit too comfortable, and that means then that we don't put that pressure on ourselves to be able to show up and make it happen. Sometimes when we've got that stretch goal, when we know that we're going to need to work that little bit harder to make it happen, that's where we start to achieve the results. We don't want to get complacent. So we can create those big goals, but then we need to make them into manageable steps. So what I recommend to people is, if you're starting with the quarter, you need to start looking at what does that look like each month. Then some of the things will need to happen in a chronological order, and some of the things will not necessarily be time specific, but we need to give it a time. We need to give it a time when we want to get it done by, to help us to be able to stay on track. So we can break the quarters down into the months, and then we can break those months down into weeks. And then when we get to each week, we can break it down into the days. So this is something that we have been working on in the accountability group that's happening for April. There's about 10 people in the group. We check in the morning with the priorities for the day, and we check in the evening to look at how people are getting on. And I'm there for support and guidance in between. So this is where people have set those goals. They've been able to break it right down. And when we get to the week, we know what it is we want to achieve over the week. So now we can start to break it down into each day. Now we can look at our diaries, and we can look to see what commitments we have, and then we can look to see what time and energy we have available to be able to allocate those time slots or those days into what we want to get done. So we want to be able to look at that week a lot closer to the time. We don't want to be planning the weeks and the days like 3 months in advance. So I don't know what my diary is going to look like in the third week of June. So right now, I just need to know, what do I need to complete in June, and what needs to be completed each week to stay on track. When I get closer to that, when I get closer to that third week in June, then I can start to look at, okay, what's in my calendar for this week? What do I need to be able to set time aside for? What will my priority tasks be each day? Now, if I get something in now and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that absolutely has to be done by week 3 in June, so by week 3 of month 3 in this quarter, then I'm going to think ahead a little bit, and I'm probably going to go to week 2 and set aside that time now so that I've got some contingency in place to make sure that I hit that deadline. So reverse engineer your outcome, break those big goals down into manageable steps. Think about what needs to happen first, what needs to happen in chronological order, what needs to happen in succession, and then you can start to plan it in. Plan and divide it up over the months into weeks. And then when you get closer to the time, you can start to determine what your priorities will be each day. And that's going to help you to show up, and that's going to help you to get things done. Number 3, identify what you don't need. So a lot of our clarity comes from actually cutting out what is not essential. So this is something that actually we pick up on when we do the accountability challenge. So it's happened a couple of times now, but this is something that actually really helps people to get really clear on. If I'm asking that question every morning, what are your 3 priorities for the day? It helps people to sit down and make that decision. What are the 3 things I absolutely have to get done today to be able to stay on track? So it helps people to have that clarity, and it helps people to decide what is no longer essential. So what's not negotiable, what absolutely has to be done today, but also what is negotiable, and actually what's maybe not even necessary. Now, when we hold really long to-do lists, quite often there will be things that have been on that to-do list for a very long period of time, and we're no longer kind of really aware that they're there. It just sits on that to-do list. So when we do this, it means that we're able to actually make that decision. Actually, this has been here for quite some time. Nobody's asking about it. It doesn't impact anybody. It's clearly not important enough for me right now. So maybe I just put it in the car park to come back to. So you can see the post-it notes behind me underneath the diary. That's the things that I put in the car park. They were things that at one point I thought were important. As time went on, they didn't really fit into what I was working on. So I don't really want to cross them off the list. There's lots of things that did get crossed off, but these are the things that I think this could be something I want to come back to at a later stage when I can push it up to be a priority. So cut out what's not essential. Look at what's a distraction and look at what's just noise. What are the things that you're doing because you think you should be doing them because everybody else is doing them, but actually it doesn't really align with you and how you work and how you want to run your business or how you want to show up. If it's becoming a distraction and it's just noise, then make that decision to cut it out. Really important. Number 4 is to know your resources. So you will probably have heard me talk about internal resources and external resources. So your internal resources is everything that you bring to the table. It's everything that you have, your skills, your knowledge, your experience, everything that you contribute to making something happen. So you need to know what is it that you have so that then you can identify where the gaps are. So if you know what you bring to the table to make this plan happen, then you can see where the gaps are, where you might need to outsource, whether you might need to bring in some support, whether you might need some training. So it might be a knowledge gap, it might be a skills gap, or it might be an action gap. So we need to think about the energy that we've got. We're going to need to think about the energy that we need. And sometimes there is a gap between what we're planning and actually the capacity, mental and physical capacity that we have to show up and get things done. So we need to think about when we're creating this plan, think about the resources that you have. Think about how much you can realistically get done across a week. And it is always better to be more realistic than it is to be ambitious. It's always better to kind of create that list of what your priorities are and know that anything else that gets done is a bonus. And this is something we've been talking about this week as well. People have been saying, these are the 2 things that I need to get done. I'm pretty low on energy today, or I've got lots of other things going on today. So I'm going to create 2 priorities. Anything else that happens on top of that is a bonus. So from a mindset perspective, it's a much more positive place to be when we show up and we do the things that are really important. We get them done, we get them crossed off the list, and anything else that happens is a bonus. So we're setting ourselves up to succeed rather than setting ourselves up to fail. So know your resources. And finally, number 5, create your weekly focus point. So this ideally would be one thing that you want to have as an outcome for that week. Now, it might be that that outcome has lots of different tasks or lots of different activities within it, but have a think about what you want to have as an outcome each week. This is going to help you to avoid overwhelm, but it's also going to help you to build that momentum. So when you look at your 12-week plan, you will have the end in mind, what you want to achieve over the 12 weeks, over that quarter. You're going to know what it is that you want to achieve. So within that, every month, you're going to know what you want to achieve. You're going to know what you want the outcome to be for each month. So then we can start to identify what will the priority or the outcome be for each week that helps us to stay on track and helps us to keep that momentum. When we do that and we are able to zoom our focus in, so we're able to have that laser focus each week, then that helps us to reduce some of that white noise and it helps us to reduce some of those distractions so that we can focus in on this is the thing I'm going to get done this week. It's going to help you to avoid that overwhelm because you're not thinking about next week. You're not thinking about 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time. You're thinking about this week. This is my focus. And I know that if I get everything done this week, then I am on track. And next week, I only need to worry about next week. I don't need to worry about carrying everything over and then ending up having 2 weeks of lists of tasks to get done. So create that weekly focus point, have a really clear idea of what you want that outcome to be so that you can then get that laser focus in. You're going to remove those distractions, you're going to reduce that overwhelm, and you're going to be focused in on what you're going to make happen. So that's my 5 tips around planning. So you're thinking about this new quarter. We're in a brand new month, brand new season, brand new quarter. This is a perfect time to be really thinking about what we want to achieve over the next couple of months, whether that's personally or professionally. All of the things that I have talked through work really well, whatever your goal is. So whether you've got personal goals, professional goals, it works really, really well. So think about this week, think about the quarter, bigger picture, think about what you're focusing in on and what you want that outcome to be. In this Facebook group, and also for clients, we have that check-in. We have a check-in on a Monday. I ask you that question: what is it you want to achieve this week? What are your priorities going to be? How are you going to focus in on the things that need to be done this week to help you to stay on track? And then at the end of the week, we check in. How have you been? How have things gone? How have you been doing? What has worked really well? What hasn't worked so well? How are you going to take that into next week? So use this Facebook group. For those of you that are working with me, you can use our check-ins, our WhatsApp group check-ins to be able to hold yourself accountable. I will help you where I can. Show up, share, and engage, support each other, and we will all get that momentum going. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to be working on. Do feel free to share what you're planning in for this week. If you need any support or guidance with that, feel free to ask. But I'd love to know what success would look like. How are you going to know that this week has been a good week when we get to the end of it? So I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, feel free to pop them in the comments. I will keep my eye out for them retrospectively and look forward to hearing how you all get on. Next week, we will be focusing in on intention and how we can use our intention to build on the momentum and help us to put that plan in place and make it happen. So feel free to ask away. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Have a great rest of the week, and I will speak to you all very soon.